All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Accomplices for Justice, number 8, or take 8. Uh, and we will be joined by Pastor Hughes momentarily. He is delayed at a meeting, and I'm admitting people and trust all of you are doing a great job of staying on mute and keeping your video off, but you're welcome to join in at some point if you'd like. I'm not going to be officially monitoring everyone until Wiley and I begin talking, but I'm going to start with our introductions, and we'll introduce Pastor Hughes when he arrives. For me, I'd like to sort of let everybody know, if you don't know who I am Rabbi Jonathan Freirish. I have been working and coordinating and organizing for racial justice and equity here in Buffalo for a while. I am formerly a pulpit rabbi and now doing other things. I published a blog post last week, and it looks like Wiley is arriving. Is that true? There he is. Okay. Hello, Pastor Hughes. There you are. All right.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Been a
I was
crazy
just
day.
I was just getting to introductions,
Oh,
just
good.
introducing myself. So, uh, quick, thoughtful quote of mine from late, kind of on topic with what we're talking about, is I wrote, "We need to be explicit about a system of responsibilities and rights about discourse. Some people call it a public ethic, and that might be a path forward. Others convene regular meetings about citizenship to create a broader conversation about American civic identity, or gather around service, leadership, and civics to forge real connections and make substantive impacts. We are in a clear crisis as an American society, wherein the public portrayal of our divisions is regularly weaponized in political spheres. We must counter this with a broad-based movement held together by ever-strengthening strands of interpersonal discourse and connection. We need to reassert a common agreement about our responsibilities to one another, even the most basic ones about how we interact." So that, in a nutshell, is something of my mission statement for us in general. So that's one thing about me. Pastor Hughes, I found a wonderful quote of yours from Facebook recently. You wrote, "Love will always look like heresy to those who worship their theology over God." You want to expand on that in your introductory words about yourself?
Uh, yeah, sure. I think well, I mean, it's self-explanatory. When we talk about love, the question is always asked, who? Who do we love? To quote from the Bible, there's a story where Jesus is talking to people about loving our neighbor, and a lawyer stands up and says, "Well, who is my neighbor?" And so that's always the question when we're talking about power, in terms of power. Well, okay, we're supposed to love, but who are we supposed to love? Were we supposed to love love your neighbor? Okay, who is my neighbor? Because there's always this, and sort of like what the book that we're talking about today talks about, othering, right? It's I'm gonna love, but I'm only gonna love the people that I want to love. I'm gonna love my people and not love those people, right? And so love is there's always a power element in it when we're talking about relationships. So that's basically where that came from.
And of course, requoting you back at you, reminding us that this particular type of love is what Dr. King would call love. You know, this agape love, this
Right,
love that isn't romantic love, but
right,
the love one's neighbor love, and that
right,
and that the whole idea that there might be judgment implied in it takes it away, right? That's not love, right? The
right.
idea that I get to select who I love is, in fact, undermining the whole essence of the principle of love that we would use in civic relations. That it's supposed to be a principle, and as a principle, it's supposed to apply universally,
Right,
not selectively.
right, right. But
Oh,
our
good.
tendency to be selective about it is where the problem comes in. Anyway,
Oh, so big is that problem.
yeah. Yes. Wait. What happened to my? Don't do that. Okay. Sorry,
Um,
I'm having trouble over here.
Well, no, you just showed up and hopped online. You're fine. We are forgiving to the people we love, which is supposed to be everybody, right?
Th- Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So, uh, I'm going to start us off. I was in contemplating. Belonging Without Othering is a very interesting book because, and the first part of it really focuses on this question of who is the other and how do we other? And the answer is basically we do it all the time. It's the air we breathe. Especially in the setting of, as Chris and I were beginning to talk about before we started, of a nation state where the definition of who we are as a nation implicitly others someone, right?
Hmm.
We are Americans. And what do we mean by that? We mean by that, uh, depending upon who you talk to, we are Americans who look a certain way, Americans who speak a certain language, Americans who are of a certain religion. All of those things go into the definition of American, and perhaps our fundamental challenge is how do we redefine American to be less othering and more inclusive, or more about belonging?
Hmm.
Because Professor Powell and Professor Menendian do a pretty good send-up of how inclusion is not actually all that inclusive, and that even what they call equitable inclusion doesn't, in fact, accomplish things. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a sec.
Hmm.
Um, oh, and Nanette says, saw your service again online, Pastor Hughes. You compared gospel to, I think, peanut butter and jelly sandwich. That was good.
Okay, yeah. Actually, I compared the doctrine of the Trinity uh to a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Yeah. I don't know what's wrong with my camera here. Anyway, can you hear me?
I can hear you. You're
Okay,
fine.
well, I don't know what the camera's doing, but yeah. So yeah, it was a Trinitarian sermon where I drew an analogy to a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
All right.
quite.
So, on topic for today, though, we have talked a good amount about Malcolm X's assertion uh, in the 1960s and in conversation, in argument with Dr. King, that one couldn't show up to the table if one wasn't already equal.
Right.
And that the problem with demanding a seat at the table was this inclusion question of, if I'm included at the table but I'm not equal, then it doesn't matter anyway. So that Malcolm Xian question, Shabazian question, as it were, uh,
Shabazian.
um, it is very much substantiated by Professor Powell's experience of early inclusion efforts as a Yale student in the late 60s and early 70s, and their retelling of the stories of women being included in Ivy League schools, and their inclusion, quote unquote, inclusion in the spaces does not in fact affect any sort of equality or participation or belonging. They are
Mm,
deliberately othered even in their being at the table.
right.
So, what happens, therefore, if we look at this particular paradigm of theirs? Does their belonging model answer our questions about the challenges that we've identified of DEI in specific, but inclusion, even equitable inclusion in general? And I'll define equitable inclusion according to their terms. Equitable inclusion occurs when there is a conscious effort to ensure that inclusion is experienced on an equitable basis. So belonging occurs when members of the group are made to feel as if they belong to the institution, when members of these groups are empowered and have a say in the organization, design, construction, or reconstruction of that institution. Their elements of belonging are inclusion and equity and accommodation is just one element. A sense of connection is a second. Visibility and recognition is the third. And the big one is agency or co-creation in the actual space. So do we feel that belonging answers our inclusion questions, number one? And number two, how do we get there? I mean, is this pie in the sky stuff, or uh is it possible?
Well, I think it's possible, but we have to also take into consideration who is doing the agency. Where does the agency lie? I think programs like DEI and intentionally including or intentionally creating an equitable space. If it's done by the group who's been doing the discriminating, eh, it's kind of self-defeating in my opinion. I think when when we talk about, take for instance, we talked about DEI, DEI initiatives. If the DEI is being initiated by the very people who were practicing discriminating in the first place, how effective can the DEI program be? You understand what I'm saying? Because there's
Uh-huh.
always going to be some bias there. It's always going to be some kind of bias. And we see this happening even now where these DEI programs at Ivy League schools are being unraveled, they're being dismantled, and they're being gutted because they really didn't want to do it in the first place. So you say pie in the sky, I would I would lean toward that at this point.
Okay, but so that begs the question, what's the alternative? If our efforts are not led by the people who are in charge of the systemically oppressive structure to begin with, how do we make those efforts?
Well, how about we not make it possible for these kinds of discriminations to be a part of the hiring process, right? Why do we have to put our race on these applications? Why do we have to put these things on there? How come we can't just be hired for the quality of our work or our experience or our education? Why does it have to be? Why does race have to be a factor there? You understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely. So there are positive examples of what you're talking about.
Hmm.
Uh, for example, uh, hiring in orchestras. One of the things that has happened in a number of orchestras, I think in BPO as well, but throughout the world, is entirely blind, totally blind auditions. So the musician goes behind a screen, no one sees them. No one identify their CV or resume is entirely anonymized. So there are no markers of gender or race or identity uh, in the musical encounter. And it turns out that this one thing has incredibly diversified uh, orchestras across the world. So that's number one. So blind auditions actually make orchestras diverse, or even more fair. Another thing was mentioned in the book, and I'd seen it elsewhere, when um, there was a mandate in German corporations to have 40% of the boards be women. And what happened when this happened is, hold on, is that when when they hit that level of participation among women, there was no longer a marginalization of women at any level in the corporation because they were so numerically significant that they were no longer othered, as it were.
Mm.
Uh, and and these examples, same thing happened, interestingly enough, on The Daily Show. Uh, when The Daily Show anonymized and resumes in their hiring process, they began to hire funny people from different backgrounds more regularly, because it totally changed how they saw and it, does an end around about bias and who's an insider and who's an outsider.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, not Nanette points out Hassan Minaj. Not to mention, look at their lineup today, right? Almost all of their new comedians hired in the last 5 years are people of color or women.
Yep.
So it is possible to do this systematically. But the only ones who do it, and this is really the crux of the question, are the people who have the power to do it. We can demand it,
Mm-hmm.
but we have to get buy-in that it's worth doing. And I think here is one of the challenges that we see systemically in our country, which
Right.
is the more buy-in from some population, the more backlash.
Yes.
So I wrote this question earlier on. How then can we create non-status threatening efforts at equity when we have an entire part of our society invested in identifying identity threats?
Well, that goes back to Malcolm X. We can't until until we come as equals. Until we come as equals, because there's really, like you said, there's just too many forces that work against equity. There's just too many. I was reading an article the other day about healthcare. They had ran some uh um this was an outside company. I think it was Sweden, or it was one of those Nordic countries had come to America. They did a 10-year study on why America can't seem to wrap its head around universal health care. And this was done over like maybe 6 or 7 years of research, and they came to the conclusion the overwhelming majority of Americans don't want universal health care because they think that non-whites will abuse the system. They think that non-whites will abuse the system, and that will be detrimental to the economy. They think then a smaller percentage believed that non-whites don't need, literally, they believe that they don't need that kind of health care. So how then can we expect equity in healthcare when the overwhelming majority of people are very discriminatory about it? You can't force people, right? So it's a conundrum.
It is a conundrum. So Chris Castro makes the good point that Heather McGhee's book, The Sum of Us, makes the same point about all this, which is very, very true. An excellent book. And Heather McGhee's subsequent work in the wake of The Sum of Us points out the places in which zero-sum thinking is overcome, right?
Mm,
A town in Maine that hired, a new immigrant mayor, right, who was a refugee and became a different town. And in my mind, I feel like at the heart of this is what we're trying to do here, which is create trusting relationships across lines where we don't normally speak.
hmm
Because, as the Sum of Us points out, the people who don't want health care for those people don't know any of those people. And this is somewhat counterintuitive to the original assertion and very important observation of Ibram X. Kendi and others in the historical sort of undermining of what they call uplift suasion, right? This idea that white people will share the goods of being Americans with people who are with non-white people if only they got to know us better, right? So
right.
there was there was this whole idea, and Kendi does an amazing job in Stand from the Beginning, showing that no amount of familiarity with how great Black people are, how great African Americans can perform, convinces white people to share. And that's horrible. on the one hand. On the other hand, now we are faced with a significant multi-societal level othering, right? Nanette says, and if we did a better job of performing up, being more educated and such, right? And it turns out that there's no amount of uplift that will convince white people who are so bought into not sharing to share. Right. So, Claudine Gay, as president of Harvard, still gets dinged for being an African American who's quote unquote taking advantage of DEI, which is crazy because, of course, she is somebody who performed well and did great by any objective standards. So when people do well, we get tokenized, and when people don't do well, we get villainized. And we get a president who did everything whiteness says makes you a part of the team, right? Harvard presidency, and in the end they were just black in the end. Yes, thank you, Nanette. So now I'm offering what a counterintuitive suggestion, I guess, which is the idea: what happens if we, in fact, work hard to reach out to the person in some of us who says, no way, I don't want healthcare because those people will get it. How do we then rebuild the connections across our society so that people begin to see ourselves as connected? How do we undo, Pastor Hughes is coming back, hopefully with a working camera. How do we undo the idea that of the zero-sum game? Is it possible to build personal connections, build communal connections, build a sense of togetherness across those ways? Because we need to re-identify who is helped when we do things. It seems,
Yeah, I don't know what's wrong on my end. It keeps freezing, it's shutting down. So I am so sorry.
That's okay. So Nanette says we keep meeting, build personal connections across our different differences and perimeters, invite white people to church, to Sunday dinner, to cookouts and jazz clubs. I think, yes, absolutely all of those things. And I think we need to welcome people into our homes. I think at the heart
I
of it,
agree.
we need to Pine Grill reunions, as Chris. You'll have to explain that, Chris. What is Pine Grill? It's a reference I don't know. Yeah, Nanette says Nanette is happy to have me stumped.
So it's a jazz festival that celebrates a bar that has been closed, I think, for decades now, but it's in Martin Luther King Park, the first 2 Sundays in August, and it's fantastic.
So we all have to go, is what you're saying.
We all have to go because Chuck's mad because he never heard about it until last year. He said, if they had told me that there was a free jazz festival in MLK Park, I would have been there, years ago. But we found out about it last year, and so now it's on our list of things to do.
So that sounds great. So here's an interesting question on the backlash front. This is a sensitivity that I didn't know about until I encountered it as a white person participating in Juneteenth. When I did that and brought our family to Juneteenth, I heard from African-American colleagues at the time that there was a significant sense that Juneteenth was meant to be a Black unity, African-American solidarity gathering, and that it wasn't really a place for white people to show up. So Pastor Hughes, given that, and given that we have just had Nanette wants to cut in.
He wants to cut in.
Uh, uh, we will ask Nanette to unmute. Go for it, Nanette.
I'm here. Yeah. I feel like I definitely want to see white people at the Juneteenth celebration. I want them to come. And I mean, it's a big, I'm a big believer that real change happens on the micro level and eventually expresses on the macro level. Like you
Amen.
said, Rabbi, like you said, Rabbi, have people in our homes, um, and have them, like I said, come to our churches and see, hey, we have church just like you do. I'll be darned, and our food is different, but it's still food, it's still family, and we have more in common than we have separate. Juneteenth, I think, like I said, I think it's important for white folks to come and see what it's about and everything. But I was not in favor of Juneteenth becoming a national holiday. I'm sick of white people saying to me, Happy Juneteenth. I'm like, you this ain't about you. You don't know what you're what? Happy Juneteenth. Juneteenth is really about how white people held on to slavery for 3 more years than legal. So it's just not appropriate for white people to be saying Happy Juneteenth to me. It's just I do. I feel like it's our thing. Y'all don't understand. Knock it off with the Happy Juneteenth crap. And like I said, what really needs to be talked about is how desperately America was willing to hold on to keeping Black people in bondage. That, I mean, these slave owners, they knew and just didn't tell people. That's the America that we live in, and that's Juneteenth for white people. That's the part of Juneteenth that white people need to look at.
But Nanette, I want to push back here a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The perception of Juneteenth from African Americans here in Buffalo is it is a day of unified celebration, of cultural sharing, of deep sense of Blackness in one with another, and
Yes.
which is all celebratory, not the marker of what absolutely what you're talking about. The fact that here are Texans finding out about emancipation years after the fact, which was actually what was happening. And I understand the idea of having our people together in a solidarity sense, right? If there are moments of Jewish celebration that are hard to share with other people.
Shabbat Shalom, my brother.
Well, Shabbat's an interesting one, but generally speaking, Shabbat is easier because American Christians have some sense of what the Sabbath is. I'm not. Somebody saying to me, Happy Yom Kippur, is somebody who doesn't understand what Yom Kippur is about, right? Because it's not a happy day. And
I mean, the same can be. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Pastor.
The same can be said about Memorial Day. People always wish me happy Memorial Day. And I'm like, that's not what the day is for. Memorial Day is for the people who passed away in service to their country. There's something happy about that. And so, yeah, there are some things that are not specifically for quote unquote everyone, but that's not an exclusionary thing either. It's not that Memorial Day is to be excluded from. It's just that the true nature of it needs to be expressed. And I think the same goes for Juneteenth. I think that Juneteenth is a Black celebration. Yes, Miss Massey, it is a Black celebration. It is a Black thing. But I don't think that needs to be exclusionary. Honestly, I think more white people need to know about Juneteenth because most white people in America celebrate July the 4th as Independence Day, but Black people weren't free in July 4th. So here I am, a former military service member. I don't do July 4th like most Americans do. For me, Juneteenth is Independence Day because thus when my ancestors were officially free. So it's it is a black thing, but it doesn't have to be exclusionary. Like, it's something to me. I think the reason why I invite white people to the cookout on Juneteenth is because I want them to understand what it is. I want them to know that, you know what, America has made some promises, and this is the same language of Dr. King. America has made some promises, and we are here to make sure they keep those promises. And Juneteenth in 1865, Galveston, Texas, was the fulfillment of one of those promises. And it was a day late, and I would even say $1 short, but it was still a fulfillment. And so it's, we're right. And that is, we're coming to get our check. So I think that Juneteenth might, as much as it is a black thing, it's still an American thing to say that, you know what, you're getting it. You're slow, and you're lackluster, but you're getting it. Thank you. Let's do more. Let's do better. So I don't know. And Rabbi, he's talking about me. I invited Rabbi to the Juneteenth cookout. For those who are hating, that was me.
Yeah, but so I'm talking specifically about we're coming to get our check. Yes, Nanette, it is overdue for sure.
Overdue. Yeah.
And that's, I mean, Nanette, you highlight a really interesting and important point. And I think it's at the heart of the belonging without othering question. In order to get to belonging, we need to get to an equitable position. And in order to, because no one's going to arrive at the table as it is and all feel some degree of equality. We need to change the table. We've talked about that here before. But part of that means identifying those who really are owed for the problems created by the American system over the last 400 years, specifically over the last 250 years, but really over the last 400 years. And therein lies an incredibly thorny problem. I have zero problem. I am all in favor of identifying the descendants of people who were enslaved in this country and providing and levying a wealth tax on the wealthiest and doing an immediate transfer of wealth to all of those people to compensate for and whether, however we call it, to compensate for generational costs taken out of people's bodies, literally.
Right.
And that were invested in this country without participation in the returns. I have no problem with that kind of reparation scheme. But that's me. And in order for us to get this done, we would need to convince a whole lot of people who feel like they have been waiting for their proceeds from the American dream patiently and feel like they are, quote unquote, ahead of the line, right? That they have also been crapped on because they are struggling with poverty and happen to be white, or struggling with poverty and happen to be second or third generation Latino, or whatever, or struggling with poverty and are African American, but not the descendants of slaves, right? They are Jamaican American or Haitian American or Nigerian American. We are not a kind country to outsiders.
You said it.
And Ginny, my spouse, would point out that in photographs of people of different class in this country, most people will identify somebody who looks like they are more struggling with poverty as darker skinned.
Yep.
That the same person, that if you take, a lily white person like me and photograph me 5 different ways based on class identifiers, I will be identified as darker skinned the poorer I look. So, and this is despite the fact that numerically, there are more poor more white people in America struggling with poverty than there are all African Americans.
Yeah, and that goes across the board, Rabbi. Like, it goes across the board. If you are a part of if you are a part of the larger demographic in a population, then you are statistically going to be then the statistics are always going to be in your favor, right? And it's the same with crime. People think that black people or people of color, non-white people, commit more crimes when that's not the case. The case is white people commit more crimes, but non-white people are more convicted more of those crimes. So you hit the nail right on the head. You hit the nail right on the head. It's that othering that we do. It's that separation that we do. That I think, like the book says, it bars us from any kind of progress, meaningful progress, I should say.
Well, so they have these prescriptions for creating belonging.
Mm-hmm.
And I like their fourfold definition. And we've begun to talk about that, this sense of connection, visibility, recognition, agency, co-creation. We need to invite one another in to projects as opposed to starting them. And this is, there's a whole section of public policy academia about this called collaborative governance.
Mm-hmm.
Which talks about how we need to stop solving problems for people. If we're going, the initial presentation on this, Professor Siddiqui at the Maxwell School at Syracuse gave a presentation on a study that she did, and she used the example was a community effort to solve hunger.
Mm.
And everybody in the community was invited in, and they had representatives. They made as wide an invitation as possible to address food insecurity in their community. And what ends up happening is the people who show up most end up making the most impact. And if people, for some reason or another, are not figured out how to, and it goes back to the table, right? Don't feel that they're really at the table from the start.
Yes.
They don't end up showing up repeatedly to participate. So it turns
Right.
out that those initial outreaches are all the more important. So they went back and went to the Native American participants in this group and said, how come you aren't showing up? We invited you. We feel like food insecurity is an issue. And they said, all you started up talking about hunger, and what you talked about with regard to hunger didn't even register for us. That's not the way we talk about food.
Right.
And so we didn't feel like our voices in this project were even being heard because the vocabulary wasn't the same. I mean, I had this experience just yesterday talking about mentoring faith leaders, right? So we're a bunch of faith leaders getting together to create a mentoring cohort to help each other out.
Mm-hmm.
And in a sec, Nanette, we're gonna open it up to questions in a sec. And one in the feedback in one of our small groups, one of my colleagues said, I want to tell you what I've learned from today, but I'm so busy trying to figure out what you're all saying because you're using a different language than I've ever understood. This is a group of rabbis, right? We're all rabbis, and that's still happening. And turns out, we're using, new business terms, learning edge and all sorts of stuff like that. And none of it is making any sense to our colleague, who is an experienced mentor, who has been doing mentoring for decades. And so this is really our big question. How do we start off the project in such a way? Because here we are, and Nanette, you have said it. We are inviting each other into one another's homes. We are spending time with each other, trying to relationship build and trust build. We are doing all of that. And then we come to a project, and then still some people feel they're at the table and some people feel they're not. So are there some methodologies when we start projects that we might be able to highlight on to emphasize belonging as part of the initiative in the project? Is there something we could do?
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure there are several thousands of ways that you could do it, but I think um, the foundation of any relationship is honesty and trust, right? So I feel like if we're going to engage in projects together that benefit not just our group but other groups as well, then there has to be a shared level of understanding, a shared level of understanding. There has to be a watershed moment for me, and I'm just talking about myself. When we're talking about relations, when as an African American, you're having relationships with white people. Before I get engaged, I like to have a sit down. I like to let's come together. Let's talk. Let's have a pint or a coffee or tea or have a meal because I want to know. I don't want to know your politics. I don't want to know. I want to know who you. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about things. What's your favorite color? Well, what's your favorite movie? Because the and it seems arbitrary, but that's how I get to know a person. When I find out what interests a person, what books are you reading? That's my big question. What books do you read? And you talk about what a person is reading. That's what they're putting into their mind. And so, if I know that you're reading books written by Ben Shapiro or something, I'm probably not going to get in the relationship with you like that. I'm not going to get into a community project with a person who reads Ben Shapiro. Not that there's anything wrong with Ben Shapiro. He's fine. He's all right. He's entitled to his own opinions, but I know some of his opinions don't line up with my opinions. And so I know that because this person is reading this, consuming this kind of information, might not be a good fit. So, for me, there has to be some kind of level of understanding that we have between each other, and then we can start talking about how we can put our heads together. If we don't have the same head, we can't put our heads together. Doesn't matter how many times we bang our heads together, it's not going to work because
So-
Go ahead.
So,
Sorry.
so here's the question though. Do we have the luxury of litmus testing who we work with?
I don't think we have a choice. I mean, coming from an African American perspective, I don't think we have a choice. Black people, we have to. We have to. We have to because there's just been so many times where Black people have been have been in partnership and with white organizations and white people in general, and we've been burned. We've been burned. Our movements have been co-opted, watered down, destroyed from within. It's happened so many times. We don't have the luxury as people, as non-whites, to not vet whites. We just don't have that luxury. It's time consuming and sometimes it does hobble us. It hobbles our progress. But out we don't have the luxury of not we don't have the luxury not because we don't have many opportunities. And I've seen so many grand opportunities destroyed because we partner with the wrong people. We partner with the wrong people.
So this element is one that, places me in an interesting position, right? Because, when you, Pastor Hughes, ask me what I'm reading, right, that's the beginning of a longer conversation because
Yes.
I might have been reading Ben Shapiro, but not because I agree with him.
Right.
And so there's where all of the question on the red flag is the red flag a don't go there, or is the red flag a sign go there with caution?
Right. Let's lean into it. Right.
Extra work required on this guy.
That's right. That's right. You're exactly right. You're exactly right.
Because, I'm facing this right now amongst my rabbinical movement, my rabbinical college, my rabbinical colleagues. So my rabbinical association, which is the Reconstructionist Rabbinical Association, the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, and our movement is struggling with having ordained anti-Zionists.
Mm.
So the Reconstructionist movement is now being associated using that wonderfully terrible word disproportionately with anti-Zionists among Jews. There are more anti-Zionist rabbis that come from the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College than anywhere else. A colleague of mine just laid it out in no uncertain terms and said, I will have nothing to do with anti-Zionists because I am the child of a woman who was raped by Muslims in Morocco before becoming an Israeli citizen as a refugee. And these people are against my people. Categorically. And this is a colleague, a rabbi, who is the descendant of North African Jewish refugees fleeing sexual violence. And there we are. There's the litmus test.
Can't afford not to.
If you are against me,
yep,
my very existence, I can't work with you.
Yeah.
And this, so herein, but now, and we're going to open it up for conversation because I really want to hear Nanette's comment and everybody else's comments. But here is the crux of the matter. We are in a country where there are a number of people who are using othering for their own purposes.
Yes.
To emphasize, we don't want you here.
Yes.
So we are trying to build a country that is going to require some laws that are enforced at the end of force for real change. We are not going to get another integrated schools moment like we had in the 60s without the National Guard standing guard over integrating students. We are not going to get real voting rights without not just law, but law enforcement standing by it. We are not going to get real rights in this country until we have law enforcement reformed so that it is not an imposition of slave catchers.
Right.
There's going to be some real hard change for this to happen. I don't think we get there if we don't do the trust building, relationship building right here first.
Completely agree. I completely agree. Muhammad Ali said it very eloquently. If there's 1,000 snakes in my house, and I know some of them are poisonous, but not all of them are poisonous, but I can't tell which one is poisonous. Am I just supposed to let them all in? Because I know that there might be one in there that's not poisonous. So it's yeah.
It's for real. It's for real.
It's real.
All right. So I'm inviting everybody to come off mute if you want, Nanette.
Well, I was involved with, there's a real estate association here in Buffalo, and they were trying to put together a DEI event. And they were inviting everybody throughout Western New York who was involved in a company and they were in a DEI position, and anybody that was in a DEI position to monthly meetings to help form this event. And I went every month, and it was clear that the white people who were planning this event wanted no input from the non-white people. They just wanted non-white people there so that they could show what they were doing for us. But I kept going, hoping that eventually there might be an opening for some real input. And finally, one woman was talking about an all women's empowerment group that she put together. And I said, oh, where's your website? And I looked the website up on my phone, and it was all white women or white appearing women. I think one was Puerto Rican or something like that. And I said that. I said, oh, they're all white. And this lady, she tore into me with, textbook white fragility. textbook, well, we couldn't find anybody, and don't judge us because blah, 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 and yada, yada. And I looked around the room at everybody like, y'all gonna let this white lady talk to me like this at a DEI event? You're really gonna put me in the position of being the angry Black woman and defending myself? Are you all not? I literally looked around like, are you all not seeing this? And eventually I got accidentally dropped from the mailing list that was inviting that was inviting everybody to this meeting. And the event happened and I heard about it in past tense. So we're talking about having a space at the table. Too often, white people want us at the table to affirm themselves. They don't want us showing up as our authentic selves. They don't want us muddying up. They want the white chocolate. They don't want us muddying up the white chocolate with our truly Black experience and our truly Black bringing.
So Nanette, my question to you here is, I know you pretty well, a little bit, and I hope that were I in that space with you in the future, you would trust that I would not leave you undefended. You would trust that I would be your wing person, that I would stand up for you. And I think I want to really invite the rest of us white people to make relationships with our African-American neighbors and offer to go into the spaces with them, offer to be a wing person, build the trusting relationship that says, I am not going to let you take the heat for being the token person in the room there. Because it's not fair. It is not fair to ask African-Americans to step into those spaces and then be the vulnerable lightning rod for, as you put it, white fragility. We need to take responsibility as ostensibly white people to step into those spaces with you. Is that a reasonable request to make of our white people here, Nanette?
Yep. That's it. Yep. Okay. And even if it's awkward, I mean, there were people around. I think people were caught. I think maybe people did see what was happening, but it was awkward and they didn't know what to say. But even if it's awkward, do it. Just so that the Black person in the room can see, wow, somebody did have my back. Even if they didn't do it right, quote unquote, or thoroughly or whatever. Just so that the non-white person can see, yeah, somebody did have my back. I did have an ally in this room.
Thoughts, Pastor Hughes?
I mean, I agree. I think it goes back to that whole conversation about allyship. You know, having skin in the game. Are you willing to um, suffer the same slings and arrows of misfortune? Are you willing to stand up and say, you know what, that ain't right? I see what you're doing to this person, and that's not right. That's racist, or that's ableist, or that's whatever. To me, that's the best kind of allyship that I could ever ask for. Just having a little skin in the game, risk it. I've been in many situations where I've been left by myself by so-called friends who could call themselves allies, but in their mind, being an ally to a person of color means let's go do a demonstration, let's go protest, let's go hang up a sign. But then, they don't want to get arrested. They don't want to combat racism in the workplace, right? They don't want to risk their own stature. They don't want to risk their own job. They don't want to risk their own social status, especially around here. They don't want to do that at all. So they're not going to really speak up. They'll come to me in private and say, well, I think it's really awful what they're doing to you. But they won't go to the people mistreating me and say, I think it's awful what you're doing to him. And so, If we are really truly equal, then justice will be equally shared between all of us. Because, like King said, an injustice to one is an injustice to all. And until all feel the same injustice, there will never be equity. There will never be equality. Until white people, I should say, not white people, until the dominant culture, the dominant demographic feels an injustice when injustice happens to the minority, then there won't be any equity. There has to be a commonality between us. There has to be a group of people who say, you know what, what's happening to those people over there is not right. We should do something about it. And until that happens, we're on our own. Stephen Biko said it, we're on our own.
Hopefully not. I mean, Nanette says, let's
Hopefully.
march and hold up signs and then go home to Amherst and show pictures to our white friends to show
Yeah,
how much cooler we are to our white neighbors.
yeah, exactly.
100%.
Depressing.
So Pastor Hughes and I have started a Patreon page. So if you want to support Accomplices for Justice, I just put the link in the chat, and I will put it on Facebook as well. Click, become a member. We are going to eventually provide members-only material. So, backroom discussions, opportunities for, smaller appearances with the two of us or whomever. So check it out, spread the word. For next time, I probably unbeknownst to Pastor Hughes, came up with 3 potential books for us to sort of start the ball rolling next time. If we need a book, but 2 of them I haven't read yet. One I love, so they're all interesting suggestions. I hope they've all been recommended. One is The Whiteness of Wealth: How the Tax System Impoverishes Black Americans and How We Can Fix It, by Dorothy Brown. One is called The Rise and Fall of the Second American Republic: Reconstruction from 1860 to 1820. And for those of you who are not scholars of Reconstruction, it is one of the many areas of American history that most of us know crap about. And it is a key.
That's it. And that's intentional.
Yes, on purpose.
It's on purpose.
For sure. So this is a new book. It just came out in March by an amazing scholar who I've mentioned before. She's the scholar who wrote The Cause of Abolition, which is a history of the multiracial history of abolitionism, which is also very interesting. And then my third book is actually right on topic for what we're talking about today. It's called The Nation That Never Was. I've mentioned it a lot. It is, Pastor Hughes, it is on topic for what to do about July 4th.
Okay.
Because The Nation That Never Was is by Kermit Roosevelt. He's a legal scholar, and he pulls apart, he calls it Reconstructing America's Story, but he pulls apart our four what he identifies as central false myths of American identity. Number one, that the founders were good people like us. Number two, that our founding documents actually envisioned a society that we would want. Number three, that the Revolutionary War was fought for causes that we would identify with. And number four, who is in fact heir to those things?
Oh, my goodness.
He says that the heir to those original 3 things is in fact the Confederacy. And
okay, yeah, I vote for that one.
And that we are in fact the heirs to the United States as fought for and won in the Civil War, and that it is and he makes a very important point about we have to stop calling them the Union troops. They are the United States military.
Interesting. Yeah, I vote for that. That one sounds fascinating.
Noted.
That one sounds very fascinating.
Okay, so I'm going to put the link to this book. To tell you the reason why I chose this is in response, Pastor Hughes, to your observation about July 4th. We have friends who invite us over to July 4th every year for a reading of the Declaration of Independence. So we bring our kids and everybody goes around and we read a little bit. And last year, I was driving around a lot with our son Jude, and we listened to this book on in the car together. And we're determined to not have the reading of the Declaration of Independence not be accompanied by Frederick Douglass's response. Because reading the Declaration of Independence without commentary at this point is kind of like reading scripture without a guiding message. There needs to be a response.
Right.
So I will put the link in the chat and then ask if anybody else has any questions before we sign off for today. Thank you all for your patience with our technical issues. Thank you all for being here and your support. Thank you all for your comments. It's always great to have your participation. I want to, Bill Birmingham, I think it is his first time in our group today. So thank you. And Nadine Rybeck is an old connection, old in terms of time together, but not necessarily old. So it's great to see all of you here. Those of you who've come back and those of you who are new to our group, it's really wonderful. Any final thoughts, Pastor Hughes, or do you want to send us out with an appropriate blessing?
Gosh, you know what? Let's assume a posture of prayer, brothers and sisters. It has been said that the work is never done. And so we have to live with that the work is never done. But that doesn't mean the work must stop. And so we pray to the Almighty to continue to strengthen us, to inspire us, and empower us to do the work whose fruits we might not ever experience. But that we pass the work on to the ones who come after us and hope to that same Almighty that they might see it come to fruition. And we say amen.
Amen, Selah. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks.